The views and opinions expressed on the following program are those of the host and guests and do not necessarily represent those of any organization, including One Generation Away.
The freedom of a people to choose its leaders is the root of liberty.
Keep alive this experiment in liberty.
Liberty, in case you've forgotten, is the soul's right to breathe.
Government should be very minimal in protecting liberty.
Peace cannot be purchased at the cost of liberty.
The sturdy ground of liberty.
Liberty once lost is lost forever.
Fight for their liberty and for our security.
Guarantees individual liberty.
This great republic, born alone in liberty.
Liberty. Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Liberty.
Just how much do you want liberty?
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner,
a production of LibertyNation.com.
cutting through the double talk, taking on the topics, going after what the politicians really mean, and making it all clear. For your freedom and your liberty. Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Democrats do the deed, rolling the dice and resting their political fortunes on trying to reverse the results of the 2016 presidential election. Welcome back into Liberty Nation Radio, a production of LibertyNation.com and heard from coast to coast on the Radio America Network. Democrats finally give in to Republican demands to take a vote on impeachment in a decision that will have far-reaching consequences. We'll review the bidding on the impeachment inquiry approved in the House this week with LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaeffer. Plus, what the hell is the story with Brexit? We've now passed the supposed drop-dead deadline of October 31st, and there's still no deal and a new election on tap. We'll discuss the state of play with LibertyNation.com managing editor Mark Angelides and the state of our liberty with LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor Scott Cosenza.
Say what? Say what? Say what? One more time.
We commence the proceedings with our signature segment, Say What?, where we roll out a virtual assembly line of wacky, astonishing, damnable, and ultimately revealing things uttered by politicians and the chattering class. Well, you asked for it, you got it, Toyota. It seems President Trump and his fellow Republicans complaining about the secret investigations going on in the basement of the U.S. Capitol were goading the Democrats to hold public hearings on the record. So now they finally have. Now, it may be or may not be that President Trump has committed an impeachable offense, but he probably has, because it's Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, and their fellow Trump-hating House Democrats who get to decide what's impeachable. They and they alone set the ground rules for the impeachment inquiry passed by the House this week with all but 2 Democrat votes and no Republican votes. They and they alone will determine whether the president's phone call with the Ukrainian president amounts to the kind of high crime or misdemeanor described in the impeachment process outlined in the U.S. Constitution. Simply put, an impeachable offense is anything the House says it is, true or not, fair or not, provable or not. And the GOP minority will make some noise and ask some uncomfortable questions and serve as a watchdog or check on the Democratic majority, but ultimately will have no power to stop the investigation. In calling the vote not for impeachment itself, but to launch an investigation into whether they should vote on impeachment, Speaker of the House Nancy Pelosi tried not to sound like she was celebrating, as she said repeatedly, this is a solemn duty.
This is something that is very solemn, that is something prayerful. Again, this is a solemn occasion. Nobody, I doubt anybody in this place or anybody that you know comes to Congress to impeach the President of the United States, unless his actions are jeopardizing our honoring our oath of office. And contrary to what you may have heard today, we give more opportunity to his case than was given to other presidents before. I don't know why the Republicans are afraid of the truth. What is at stake in all of this is nothing less than our democracy.
Right, our democracy. hanging in the balance. A solemn occasion. All because of a phone call between President Trump and the president of Ukraine that Democrats allege was a shakedown operation, with Trump threatening to withhold funding unless President Zelensky agreed to investigate Joe Biden. Of course, the Democrats never expected Trump to release the transcript of the call, which showed no quid pro quo. But by that time, the Democrats were already in too deep. But after this week's vote to conduct this impeachment inquiry, prominent Republican Congressman Jim Jordan, ranking member of the House Oversight Committee, said there are many problems with the Democrats' allegations.
4 facts have never changed, and they will never change. 4 fundamental facts. We have the transcript. There is no conditions in the transcript. There's no quid pro quo in the transcript. Even the day after the call came out, Democratic chairmen were saying, well, there's no quid pro quo there, but we're going to keep on doing what they've been putting our country through. Second, the 2 individuals on the call both have said, President Trump, President Zelensky, have both said there was no pressure, no pushing, nothing. Third, the Ukrainians didn't know aid had been held up at the time of the phone call. And fourth, and most important, what action did they take? What action did President Zelensky take or the Ukrainians take to ever free up the aid that was held up? They did nothing. No statement, no announcement of any type of investment. Those facts have never changed, will never change, but they don't care.
But no matter the facts, the Democrats have now made their fateful decision. They're essentially saying no issue in the election that's now 1 year away matters other than removing Trump from office, and they'll rest all of their electoral hopes on impeachment. So this is it. The big moment the left has been waiting for years and calling for from about 2 a.m. on the morning after the 2016 election. Impeachment. And you have to believe it's a riverboat gamble of the highest order, because it could very possibly backfire, absent proof that we haven't seen yet. This is the Democrats' admission that they cannot beat Trump in an election, so the only way to take down this despicable president is to remove him from office. But what happens if they roll the dice and come up snake eyes and the people conclude that Trump's offenses do not merit removal from office? What happens if they put all their chips on this impeachment inquiry and then don't come through with an actual impeachment vote, the one that issues essentially an indictment against the president? They'll no longer be able to say it was just a bunch of investigations that produced nothing impeachable. They have made their bed in impeachment for better or worse, and now they will have to sleep in it. Bottom line is that there's a million variables for the Democrats, but just one for Trump. Whether there's one piece of evidence yet to be unveiled, at least in public, that would cause 20 Republicans in the Senate to flip on their own president, vote for his conviction, and remove him from office. So this is do or die for the Democrats. Win or be slaughtered. I'd give them about a 1 in 3 chance of winning this argument. But if they lose it, they may well get beaten worse than in 2016. What's true with kings is also true with presidents, especially Trump, who famously hits back with a level of force previously unseen in the D.C. swamp. If you shoot at the king or you shoot at the president, you better kill him. Now, while the 45th president tries to fight off impeachment, the 44th president delivered a stern and surprising warning to his fellow Democrats this week. Barack Obama saying radical proclamations will not get the job done.
You know, this idea of purity and you're never compromised and you're always politically woke and all that stuff, you should get over that quickly. The world is messy. There are ambiguities. Yep. People who do really good stuff have flaws. Right. That's not activism. That's not bringing about change. You know, if all you're doing is casting stones, you're probably not going to get that far.
But at the same time, same event, Barack's wife, Michelle, was promoting her new book, Casting Stones at White People.
We grew up in the period, as I write, called white flight. Yeah. That is, families like ours, upstanding families like ours, who were doing everything we were supposed to do and better. As we moved in, white folks moved out because they were afraid of what our families represented. I want to remind white folks that y'all were running from us. And you're still running because we're no different than the immigrant families that are moving in, because we can so easily wash over who we really were because of the color of our skin, because of the texture of our hair. And so, yeah, I feel a sense of injustice.
I wonder if Michelle's personal sense of injustice was assuaged when she was admitted to Princeton and Harvard Law School on full scholarships and then given a job at a prestigious law firm in Chicago created just for her. But then we should hardly be surprised, huh? This is the woman who said the election of her husband as president was the first time she felt proud to be an American. Quick break, and then we're back to discuss whether the Democrats' impeachment strategy is inspired or disastrous.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Where can you find honest political commentary with sobering analysis, accountability, deconstructing threats to our liberty, and boldly reporting the truth? Subscribe to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, where facts matter.
We believe that all men are entitled to the blessings of liberty.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
So the entirety of American politics this day is impeachment of the President of the United States. The Democrats have decided that this is their path forward, and it's a decision that one way or another will be debated for decades to come, as will the entire Trump presidency. But we've reached a critical point in time where the American people are going to have to choose up sides in a rapidly escalating cold civil war. And joining us to analyze the state of play as we plunge into the deep end of the pool on an impeachment is LibertyNation.com political columnist Joe Schaeffer. Hello, Mr. Schaeffer.
Hello, Tim.
Okay, thanks for joining us. And, I'm wondering, Joe, if the American people might view this impeachment business not so much for what it is, but what the Democrats' singular focus on it has meant to the normal legislative process. In other words, nothing else is getting done by Democrats, while Trump is doing consequential things, whether you like them or not, every day. Can the Democrats win with impeachment alone?
I don't think they can. I think there's a lot of bright side with impeachment that, it galvanizes Trump supporters. It's getting a lot of the things done that the people that who voted for Trump wanted to see done. We just saw the other day, it was widely reported, that former CIA boss John McLaughlin, he was the acting director under George W. Bush, actually came out and expressed gratitude for the deep state involvement in the impeachment inquiry. This is exactly what Trump supporters wanted when they elected Donald Trump. The deep state is coming out and outing themselves. So I don't think impeachment is this winning hand for Democrats.
It seems to me, Joe, that the deep state is now going through the same cycle as the media. The media denied they were biased. Then they admitted they were biased. Then they were proud of being biased. Now they argue that it's necessary for them to be biased because Trump represents a unique existential threat to the nation. And likewise, the deep state, it seemed for the longest time they denied and ridiculed the idea of a deep state. Then they admitted that it exists. And now they're saying the deep state is there to protect the American people from the people that the voters elected. Is that pretty much where we are with this deep state business now?
It's pretty much where we are. And I was thinking about this the other day, and just what a monumental missing the moment of history that is going on here. It reminds me of the 1980s with the fall of the Soviet Union. And if you recall, there were people who opposed Ronald Reagan every step of the way in doing the things that led to the dismantling of the Soviet Union. A lot of them were Democrats, and a lot of them were in the media. And it hurt them immensely because they did not understand the moment like Ronald Reagan did.
Yes.
The Soviet Union was ready to fall. Democrats in the media today do not understand this deep state is ready to fall. It really is. They're so out of touch. Politically, they have no support at all. So I think Trump, like Reagan, senses that this thing is ready to crack, and the Democrats are lying themselves with this crumbling edifice. They're really missing a moment in history.
Now, I published a piece on LibertyNation.com this week entitled, "Has Trump Forever Changed U.S. Foreign Policy?" and speaking specifically about the decision to remove troops from northern Syria instead of leaving them in harm's way with an invading army of Turks coming down across the border. The question is, now that the Washington establishment has been outraged at that decision or abandonment of our allies, the Kurds, but Trump having done it, can the toothpaste ever be put back in the tube? Can we ever go back to the days when one president after another decided for larger geopolitical purposes, because of fear of angering our allies or whatever, that they were going to just keep American troops occupying or at least present in over 100 countries around the world? I'm wondering if it's the same with the deep state. Now that Trump has come, and now that the foreign policy establishment, along with the deep state, has been directly challenged by Trump, I'm wondering whether we can ever go back to the way that it once was with the deep state and the foreign policy elites.
I mean, it's all tied in together. It's all one and the same. The military-industrial complex, the deep state, they're all working together here. And like I said, I think that this thing is all ready to collapse. Nobody wants these endless wars anymore. Nobody wants to spend all this American treasure for things that have nothing to do with our national security while our southern border collapses into anarchy. So they're losing all support with the American people. Even if they get Trump out of there, I just don't see how they are going to be able to get the American people to support the interventionism that they want.
Joe, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Joe Schaeffer, political columnist for LibertyNation.com. Quick break, and then we're back to review the bidding on Brexit, just days after the supposedly drop-dead deadline passed with no decision.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
Exhausted by all the fake news? On LibertyNation.com's YouTube channel, facts and fresh, bold analysis are what you get without the leftist spin. Subscribe today to the LibertyNation.com YouTube channel, because
Truth
is
Making
a
comeback.
Far more important than my political future and far more important than yours, the well-being of our country.
This is Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
It has now been more than 52 months, almost 3.5 years, since voters in the UK approved Brexit, the British separation from the European Union. And the pro-EU political establishment in the UK has spent all that time doing everything in their power to water down or completely undermine the unambiguous decision of British voters. And now the drop-dead deadline of October 31st Halloween an appropriate occasion given the ghoulish nature of this whole process. And we still have no deal. And another election coming up. Here to help us sort this all out and figure out what the hell is going on in England as they face perhaps their most crucial decision since the Battle of Britain is LibertyNation.com managing editor Mark Angelides joining us from the UK. Hello, sir.
Hello, Tim. Good to be here.
Well, good to have you as always. And we're going to count on you to describe for us exactly where things do stand in this whole Brexit drama or soap opera. Why wasn't a deal made before the Halloween deadline? And what exactly will be decided in the latest election scheduled for about 6 weeks from now?
Okay, well, there's a few bits in there, Tim, so I'll start at the beginning. Now, a deal, which is an arrangement with the EU for leaving the EU, that's what the deal is. It's regulatory alignment of laws, etc., regulations, trading standards, these kind of things. Also defense issues. Now, a deal was put together. And now it was the same one that cost Theresa May, the former Prime Minister, her premiership, with a couple of tweaks here and there on the so-called Irish backstop issue. Now, the deal, which many prominent Brexiteers, including Nigel Farage, the man most responsible for Brexit in the first place, describe as a Brexit in name only.
Right.
It's not really getting Britain out of the European Union. But the deal, it did come before Parliament, the lower house, before the deadline. Now, what wasn't agreed was the schedule for doing the readings of the bill and asking for amendments on the bill. Now, that was a political move, Tim, because if they'd have gone ahead and said, all right, let's push this through, let's just do morning till night sessions, stay late into the night and get it done, kick it up to the House of Lords, the equivalent of the Senate, and then kick it back down and get the final vote passed. They could have done it. However, that would have been a victory for Boris Johnson because he promised, as you mentioned in your intro there, Tim, that he would rather die in a ditch than go beyond October 31st. So if they'd have agreed to do it before or by the 31st, then Parliament, which is not a majority Conservative Parliament, the Conservative Party Parliament, they would have been granting Boris Johnson a victory and one that would have made him unassailable.
Now, is this the same effect as in the U.S. where the Congress will not do any of the people's business, like, for example, infrastructure or lowering prescription drug prices, because it might give Trump a victory? So they won't do anything that would give their political enemy a victory, even if it might resound to their own benefit.
It is exactly that. Although with the Brexit case, many of the people who are opposing it are very much anti-Brexit anyway. But yes, it would be very much a question of we can't do pretty much anything because it will make our opponent, in this case Boris Johnson, look good. So that's the first part of the question. So there is a deal. This is why it hasn't gone through by the Halloween deadline. Now, in terms of what the election is, now the election is being called because Boris Johnson wanted an election, but because he wants to improve his majority to get through the various aspects of the bill. But because there's now an extension until January the 31st, the opposition parties have agreed to it. Now, there's not just two parties in the UK. We have a number of smaller parties as well as the two main ones. Many of these groups are actively looking to repeal Brexit. So for them, the election is a chance to get enough power to completely repeal Brexit and go back to the status quo. Mm-hmm. For the Labour Party, the official opposition party, which we would equate to the Democrats, what they're looking for is also to stop Brexit, but they want to do it by either repealing Brexit altogether, which they're not brave enough politically to stand on, but they'll do it by saying we're going to have what they call a people's vote, Because, of course, the vote that the people took in 2016 is not a people's vote.
I was wondering what exactly was the vote in 2016, if not a quintessential people's vote to uprise.
It is the very definition of it. However, this is what they would also refer to as a confirmatory vote. But what the options they're offering is not to be in or out of the European Union, because the British people have already voted on that. But what it would be to either accept Boris Johnson's deal or to remain in the EU. You see, there's no option for just leaving the EU. So if the Labour Party wins in this election, what they'll be offering is either Brexit in name only or staying in the EU. So effectively, they're offering staying in the EU. For the Conservatives, it's really just a chance to heal their party, which is quite divided at the moment between the Eurosceptics and the Europhiles. I mean, they're making all the right noises about, we must get Brexit done and administer to the wishes of the people.
Right.
However,
is that strictly lip service?
I would imagine so. 52% voted to leave the EU in 2016. Then in 2017, 80% of all the votes cast were for parties that promised the EU.
This has become so similar to the U.S., where Donald Trump won a free and fair election, and the result has been questioned and challenged ever since. And the same thing with Brexit. Thanks for joining us, Mark.
Thanks, Tim.
Mark Angelides, managing editor and international correspondent for LibertyNation.com, joining us from the UK. Quick break, and then we're back with Talkin' Liberty.
Liberty Nation with Tim Donner.
And now we welcome you into the portion of Liberty Nation Radio, which we entitle Talkin' Liberty. It's when we welcome back in our regular contributor, constitutional lawyer, and LibertyNation.com legal affairs editor, Scott D. Cosenza. Hello, Scott.
Hello, Tim.
Okay, impeachment. We have covered most of the political waterfront on impeachment. There's limited things about the law that you have to know, but whatever it is that we need to know about the legal process, tell us that now.
Well, I think the most important thing is just for people as they process it is to remember this is not a criminal charge like in a state trial court, whether that would be for something small like shoplifting or big like homicide. And as we hear talk about the different rules that may apply, it is still and always will be different from an actual criminal trial proceeding.
Now, this is just an inquiry.
Excuse me for laughing.
Which to me, though,
inquiry.
In a way, it seems that an inquiry gives you all the drawbacks of voting on impeachment without any of the benefits, which means that you're not voting to impeach the president, and yet you're now on record as if you were. Do you understand what I'm saying?
I do understand, and that does not make a whole lot. That's more of the political analysis side, I think. It doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense to me. I feel like a bill of impeachment should be put forth or not.
And the reason I didn't ask you to speak much about it is because impeachment, lest we have forgotten or are unaware of it, is a political process.
There's a limited legal framework that it has to exist in, but that's exactly right. It's anybody, any member of Congress, it's up to them in their own judgment as to what conduct is impeachable.
They and they alone.
Yes.
And each House, each individual Congress, the 2-year period of that Congress, 110th, 115th, whatever, they set the rules. And the minority has no power. Virtually none, because it's a majority vote, so all you have to do is hold the majority.
That's the only important thing, is that vote.
Exactly. Okay. They want to impeach Trump, but at the same time, they've been laying out an alternate strategy, which is death by 1,000 cuts. And now one of those cuts is trying to revoke the liquor licenses for Trump's golf courses in New Jersey from prominent Garden State Democrats.
So Phil Murphy is the name of the Democrat governor of New Jersey who appointed the Democrat attorney general, a man named Gerbir Grewal, and he's the one in his capacity as Attorney General who's in charge of the alcohol beverage kind of laws and their enforcement, their regulation. And there's one country club that Trump has that served somebody who was then in a fatal accident. They didn't kill themselves. They killed their own father who was sitting next to them in the car. It was on an afternoon, and they alleged that the driver was overserved at the country club. As you might imagine, Tim, places that sell a lot of liquor, sometimes they sell liquor to somebody who then gets into a car crash, and including a fatal one. There are some host liability laws that cover these instances. That, it's incumbent upon those people, generally speaking, who serve alcohol not to serve to somebody who is obviously intoxicated or they should have known was obviously intoxicated. But the thing I think that's funny here, Tim, is that they went right to the death penalty in terms of the licensure, which is not that it should be suspended or some kind of re-education.
Revoked.
Pull it. And here's the other thing. If you lose one of your licenses in New Jersey as a liquor license,
you lose all.
You
of them.
lose them all.
Yep.
So the several other country clubs that are that, and as you might imagine, that's how they make their money, right? They sell booze for all these wedding receptions and things like that. You can't probably keep afloat if you lose that business.
If you can't beat him in the political process, you can at least reach into his pocket and make him pay.
I think it's a real testament to the lengths that Governor Murphy and General Grewal will go to use their the power that's been granted to them by the people to advance the people's wants and needs, Tim, and instead punish their private enemy, Donald Trump, for their own political gain. This is, they're the ones that are getting the plus points from the Twitterverse and so forth for this effort to frustrate Donald Trump.
I'm sorry if this seems like a rhetorical question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What do you make of whatever merits there are in this case? And is this a revocation of liquor licenses that would have occurred if they weren't owned by a guy named Donald Trump?
Absolutely not. If they weren't owned by a guy named Donald Trump, this is a non-issue. Maybe that license would have been subject to suspension. Given the facts of the case, we don't know, and we can never know because Attorney General Grewal and Mayor Murphy have both really sullied their own offices and their own oaths when they turn them against a political enemy for political gain.
Let's move south to Georgia, where a judge has laid down the law to a sheriff saying he is not allowed to put up signs in the yards of sex offenders.
Even sex offenders have rights, Tim. And the Butts County Sheriff Gary Long, every year now for the past several years, has tried to basically put up these signs that denigrate the homes of where people registered sex offenders are and try to scare people away from them on trick-or-treating. Now, the thing is, those signs involve trespassing on the person's property and placing a sign that they don't want on their lawn. Not to mention the fact that the people who've been registered as sex offenders in that county, they're not necessarily registered as sex offenders because they predated on a youth in the neighborhood. That's not how a lot of these cases are dealt with. So,
can you be more specific about who beyond the pedophile and the more notorious sex offenders that we know about are considered sex offenders? What other crimes make someone a sex offender?
One of the largest classes of those crimes involve people who are in relationships with somebody who's not a child while they're an adult, but for somebody who is a younger teen while they're an older teen or a young adult. And as you may imagine, the parent often of a younger girl finds out about these romantic relationships and then blows the whistle on them, and the man is branded a sex offender. When in reality, it's an arrangement or a relationship that society may deem inappropriate. But I think that all would agree in sort of the cold light of day that it's wrong to brand that person. And this is part of the reason why it's so troubling, because they're going to have lifelong consequences like this, which is a sheriff who wants to shame them. And you can imagine how ridiculous it would be if, 30 years previously somebody had had a shoplifting conviction, and the sheriff went around and followed them to retail stores and said, "Hey, that guy's a shoplifter."
I think the thing with sex offenders that distinguishes them from others is the widespread perception, and perhaps the truth, that these people cannot be cured of this. They cannot be changed into someone normal.
Tim, I have to agree with you that, and you combine that with the abject, terrified state that people are in about the well-being of their kids when they send them out into the world. And I think that you have to say, at the risk of being called a cynic, Tim, that it's the sheriff's, getting some free political hit off of these offenders by pretending to be really on the ball.
Now, I don't know if you picked up on this, but I have noticed a pattern here. It's a remarkable coincidence you, a child of Philadelphia, seem to bring forward a Philadelphia story on Talkin' Liberty virtually every week. And this week, it's the Philly Defenders Association asking a court to declare police incapable of smelling marijuana. And, I read some of the stuff on this. It has a very pungent, distinct smell. I've smelled it a couple of times in my life. How would you get that wrong? And yet you're saying, it's like 10% of the sense of smelling it by the police is actual marijuana?
The numbers are what's saying it. What's fascinating about this story, this is a kind of run-of-the-mill case where somebody's challenging some evidence but the reasoning behind it is why it's fascinating and interesting, Tim. And I think it may have actually some legs and maybe some national reach. The Philadelphia Defenders Association was granted some raw data from the Philadelphia Police Department to understand how many cars they stopped and how many they then searched because they said they smelled marijuana. This, Tim, is a very to say that it's a long-standing trouble point for liberty activists is an understatement, because what's the history here from the liberty activist side is there's a long-standing perception that police officers simply say that they smell marijuana because it's an untested it's basically a get into search free card for them. They say it, they're able to search. Nobody's ever going to refute that they didn't smell the marijuana. Well, that's what's finally happening.
Right, because that's something you can't prove, right? My senses told me there's marijuana. I guess they were wrong, but you can't prove that the person lied, right? And yet only 10% of the time?
Well, that's what's news, and that's what has been proven.
That's stunning.
That the numbers don't. What the numbers show is that these police, you can either have your pick, Tim. Either A, they're simply not good smellers of marijuana. So when they think they smell marijuana, they're not actually smelling it.
Even though they're trained, and they may even have dogs that know how to smell
Tim, they're
it.
human beings. They live in America. They know what pot smells like.
Of course they do.
They're adults. Or they're gaming it in order to get into people's cars and search when they're not legally able to do so. An illegal pretext. You're right. There are two kinds. And I think that this will show that it's an illegal one. I bring the story to the table, Tim, because I think it really may have legs given the data that they have to back. It's one thing to be able to stand up in court and say, we know, Your Honor, they didn't smell marijuana. It's another thing to say, well, they said that it's a legal justification, the smell, but we have the data that proves, whether by hook or crook, they can't smell this stuff.
I think when 90% of your stops where you smelled something turned out not to produce what you smelled, let's just put it this way, to say it stokes suspicion of the motives would be an understatement.
Not to mention the fact that there are now jurisdictions not too far from Pennsylvania where a person may legally consume marijuana.
Thank you, Scott.
Thanks, Tim.
And thank you for joining us. That is it for this week's show, but we'll be back at you next week. A reminder that you can pick up the podcast of this program at LibertyNation.com, where you can also download one or both of our podcasts, The Uprising with Scott and The Rabbit Hole, Politics and Prose with Mark Angelides. All of it available at LibertyNation.com. So, until next week, this is Tim Donner saying, stand up for liberty. And we'll see you next time on Liberty Nation Radio.